Welcome to Behind the Build. I'm your host, Jonathan Jacobs. We are here to discuss architecture, the practices involved in it, the operations, the people, who they are, how they do what they do, and what drives them, what motivates them. Today on the show, we have Shane Laptiste from SOCA Architecture. SOCA stands for Studio of Contemporary Architecture. Shane, thank you so much for joining on the episode today.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for hosting me in this beautiful space.
Yeah, we've discussed this in the past. The space is a cool and collected 9x9 space.
Yep.
Intimate, but also perfect for what we do here. So, Shane, I wanted to start off asking you a question. We had chatted a little bit over lunch, and I wanted to understand just a little bit more, and want people to understand a little bit more about you. Maybe we'll start from the beginning, kind of what led you into architecture, and when that started. When did that start? When did you feel the need, that drive?
Yeah, I actually had in my mind this idea of being an architect from a very young age. I did not know what an architect really was. It just involved building things and creating buildings and cities, and I was passionate about playing with Lego, building blocks and other things. And it was just something that kind of crossed my mind. And then going into high school, I think latched on to that idea of architecture, and explored it further. So what it could be, what is involved in the profession, and all of the both social, historical and cultural elements that are tied into architecture. So I think that really grew throughout my high school years. So into my high school years, I became really interested in architecture, and that drove me to apply to architecture going into university.
And where did you study in university?
I studied at McGill, both for my undergrad and my master's. Either going to go into architecture or physics.
Okay.
I was really interested in like astrophysics and stuff. So it was very different paths. I'm glad I took the path that I did, but architecture was definitely something that was really on my mind for many years.
And you went to McGill. So if you went to McGill, there's tons of beautiful architecture at that school.
Yeah. Being born and raised in Montreal, it was also a great opportunity to be exposed to the campus, be exposed to the history of architecture in the city. I didn't know many architects before going to McGill, but it was a really great opportunity to just explore the city that I loved even more, and to really delve deeper into some of the context and some of the histories that hadn't been able to uncover previously.
Interesting. Okay, so you grew up in Montreal. You went to school in Montreal, and then at what point did you break away from the Montreal scene? When did that happen?
So it's the first time I spent significant time away. I spent many travels around and went to Trinidad a few times as a kid, but when I was in undergrad, I went on exchange to Sydney, Australia, to the University of New South Wales.
Wow, incredible!
It was beautiful experience. It was much more interesting, and had a much more strength the last little bit. Going to university in Australia provided a much more critical approach to architecture than I think I expected going into it.
Oh, that's interesting.
And also, it was a great opportunity actually to look back to Canada and see some of both the positives and negatives, the contradictions of Canadian society, and also especially even with the Canadians approach to indigenous communities.
Oh, interesting.
one of the I only had 4 courses. It was this beautiful, very incredible opportunity to really have a really intense educational experience, but then also have a 5-day weekend. So I had 2 days a week of courses and 5 days off. But the courses that I took were really kind of particular to Australia, and that really provided a much different perspective from a cultural, from a built environment, from many different aspects. And one of the courses that I took that I was particularly interested in was one that explored Indigenous Australian culture and how and Australia's response to that. And this was going back almost 25 years, but it was interesting to look at that and to explore further how Canada's response to Indigenous communities was the challenges inherent in that. So yeah, it was that and many of the other courses. I think can go a lot more detail in that course, but it was it was just a really, really eye-opening experience to take those courses in a different context that in some ways on the surface felt very similar,
right?
But was actually much, it shone a light on my own experiences in a different way.
It's interesting. As you're saying all of this, I'm watching you reach for trying to get a handle on what the emotion was of experiencing this.
Yeah.
And to be able to articulate that in the right way, because you're drawing on a lot of this memory. And I also know that this plays into the current landscape of architecture that you try to push forward in what you do. So it's interesting because it's a podcast, and I'm vehemently against doing video for now. I want to describe what I'm seeing, and that is you trying to really communicate what that experience was as a youth, but now also as an adult, and the inherent emotion tied to that, right? Because I know you're pretty passionate about what you do. So
yeah.
Just want to make sure that that's clear. Okay, so you finished a course in Australia. You then what? Where did you go?
So I was undergrad. So I finished my undergrad degree, finished my master's, and but actually all throughout my university, I actually made a point to explore both projects and references that were slightly outside of the main architectural canon, which is very much based on a lot of mostly European precedents, and looking at going back to some of the projects that I explored. I looked a lot at projects from West Africa, Southeast Asia, Southern Africa, as ways of just really looking at the architecture that we inhabit in a different way, and to try and gain just additional references, additional insights from architecture that is more broad and speaks to broader references and broader communities than what was typically being taught in architecture school. So
right.
That was a very significant part of my architectural journey. In addition to, I think, some really, really great insights that I gained from some really great professors at McGill. So it was a really obviously significant experience. But I think on top of what the course material provided, I think there was a lot of opportunity to really explore different ideas and explore different reference points that spoke to me in a different way.
Okay, so you finish all of your schooling, and I know you don't start your practice right away.
No,
what's the space between starting your existing practice now and end of school?
So right after I finished school, I actually worked for a couple of years at a company in Montreal that designed the software for flight simulators.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So I designed the airports and vehicles and the terrain for that you would see within a flight simulator.
Yeah.
So that was really cool. I enjoyed it. It allowed me to take like architectural experience, the model making they do in university, and apply it in a completely different world.
I always wondered, playing simulator games, who makes this?
Yeah, it's a very, very kind of particular skill set where you don't always have all of the base drawings you're making. You have to evaluate what you see and balance that with like file size and all of these technical requirements.
Right.
It's really related to architecture, but it's just looking at the efficiency of the model and the aesthetics and how that relates. It was it's a fun experience.
Totally. I've never met anyone that's said that's a path they took. So I mean, you stand alone now.
There you go. Yeah.
For many other things as well. But
Yeah.
I'll start with that. Okay, so you finished designing this, which is, I mean, again, it's so cool. Okay.
And then afterwards, my wife, a girlfriend at the time, who was from Edmonton, she wanted to move back to Edmonton for a short period of time, and we went together for what we originally thought was going to be a year, but turned into 11 years. And I worked at a firm in Edmonton that was one of the larger local firms. Did a lot of work, especially on sport and recreation projects. I worked on the Rogers place, the home of the Oilers, also a baseball and football stadium in Fort McMurray, and many other recreation centers. And in collaboration, some of those recreation centers were in collaboration with other firms like Tipul Architects, Société Impellat, and we also collaborated with other practices, other projects. So it was a really interesting opportunity to work on large scale projects, sport and recreation projects that had, I think, a fairly large impact on the cities that they served. Mm-hmm. And gained a lot of insights through that work, and really, really enjoyed those projects.
And you lived out there for 10 years beyond the initial year.
Yes. Life happens, and it was Edmonton has its own charms, and I enjoy the experience. But after a while, as my wife was pregnant with our son, we thought that we'd like to move closer to where most of our family lives.
Yeah.
In Montreal, Toronto area broadly. So we ended up on Toronto and moved about 7 years ago to Toronto, and we've been here ever since.
So if my math serves me correctly, it's 2017 when you moved there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Early
You moved back?
2017.
Okay. It's good to know that my math skills are still holding up. You're welcome, Mr. Sorial, my grade 10 math teacher.
Did a great job.
Okay, so you moved back 2017, and at that time, is that when you started SOCA, or did it change?
So I worked at a practice just outside Toronto in Whitby for a year and a half.
Yeah,
and that was a really good opportunity to work on some projects of many different scales, especially smaller scale projects in the Ontario context, and also institutional projects at different scales, residential, multi-unit residential. So I worked there for a year and a half, and that, I think, gave me the runway, the idea to go out on my own. So I after 2018, summer 2018, I decided to make the leap. And I was collaborated with a practice based in Edmonton, where one of the partners of the firm that I worked at for many years in Edmonton, he was a partner there, and we collaborated on some RFPs together in Southern Ontario. And the first two that we actually submitted, we were successful, which was incredible.
And also, I mean, for anyone that doesn't know that, to win 100% of the first two applications is crazy.
Yeah. We are very optimistic at that point.
Oh my God, we're going to be able to do this.
Yeah, we can do everything.
Yeah, the world is ours.
And then I think the next dozen to 20 we lost. So it was, that was
immediately humbled.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it was a good start. And yeah, there were municipal projects, got our foot in the door, and yeah, we kind of just built from there.
I have this visual of describing what you're talking about and how you win the first two and then you lose the next few. It's like when you go build a sandcastle.
Yeah.
Right near where the tide is about to come in. And you build it and you're like, yes, look at it. And then the tide comes in.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, right. I didn't account for that.
Yeah. Seems so stable.
Yeah.
Time, but yeah.
Oh, look, water's really taking that away. Also, I mean, but it's also, I think, a good thing to face some level of adversity early in the practice to be able to understand, okay, well, what do we have to do to be able to rectify these issues now from an RFP scale?
Yeah.
Forget about drawings and all the rest of it. It's like, how do we sell this?
Yeah. And that was something that, we really explored, and we had some residential projects, but I think, those institutional projects, that was something that was, a challenge, for any firm, but especially as a smaller practice, kind of getting your foot in the door for those institutional projects was, something that really, really had to explore how to approach properly. I think one of the things was that most of my experience was working on institutional projects, and I like the process of institutional projects, and I saw that there was an opportunity to really do those small scale institutional projects really well. And also there's also an opportunity to work on cultural spaces and community spaces for not small community organizations,
which leads back to what you're talking about. You were so invested in from learning in Australia.
Yeah. And that was a huge opportunity, but it was also really important to kind of set the groundwork of having that experience, having the firm having that experience on institutional projects, and being able to translate that into a portfolio of work that we could present to future clients and really show our expertise and our capacity to take on projects at many different scales.
And at this time, is your focus on trying to win whatever you can win, or are you trying to focus on a certain type of architecture?
It's
in a certain space.
Yeah, it's trying to win whatever we can win. It's starting out, we really take what comes. There's small residential renovations there's a fire station renovation, a soccer clubhouse, a teaching kitchen in the city of Toronto, a wide range of projects.
And how are you finding the RFP for these?
So some of them, we actually were able to, some of them we applied to these open RFP sites, and we also had the opportunity to get into a City of Toronto RFP process.
Yep.
And for small projects, very small projects.
Yep.
And that that allowed us to pursue some of those projects. So there's a golf clubhouse at Humber Valley where we added an elevator. Teaching kitchen in Scarborough. And a couple of others. So it's really that broad experience, I think, really is really key in setting that groundwork to enable the practice to actually pursue the cultural projects and some of the other projects, knowing that we actually had the internal knowledge and capacity.
Right. And ability, right? For people to understand that, okay, these guys can do this.
Yeah. because it's very difficult to break into institutional projects for smaller emergent practices. So we were, I think, fortunate that we had the partner to support some of our work and to really pursue it in a way that I think allowed both sides to gain something from the relationship.
And the we is yourself and the partner out west.
Yeah. So they're SK Stephen Kozak's ACI Architects, based in Edmonton.
Okay.
And but then I think over time, so the practice grew, and into 2020, actually, we'll go back a little bit. Sorry.
That's okay.
So I think, funnily enough, in the summer of 2018, Tura Cousins Wilson, partner, he also started more a side hustle working on residential projects.
Okay.
And at that time, I think, we probably had met a couple of times, but we connected through an organization that we were involved and co-founding with many others called BETA, Black Architects Interior Designs Association. And we submitted a proposal to this Ontario Association of Architects. They have this program called the Shift Challenge, and it's kind of a conceptual ideas competition. And we so we had a team of designers who had all connected through BETA, and this group included Tura and myself, and I think we found a good working relationship there. And over time, over the next year or so, we explored ways to actually collaborate and bring our expertise or different experiences together and to create what is SOCA today. So it was really, the SOCA has been kind of a melding of two initiatives that really kind of came together many years ago, informally, and later on more formally. So it's it was kind of a really interesting process over the years.
And so let's define what those two are. What are they?
Yeah, so there was the practice that I'd started.
Yeah.
That had the institutional experience.
Yeah.
So working on projects in Collingwood and Cambridge with City of Toronto.
Yeah.
And also some cultural buildings, and then Tura's practice that had more residential projects. And I think we each had our kind of complementary ways of working, and I think over time we kind of found a way to meld those together to create some conceptual projects and built work that really kind of align both of our interests in ways. And it's kind of always an interesting conversation looking at how what each of us bring to the projects and how we complement each other when working through the design process.
And so what does it look like? So between the two of you, because that's the practice, right?
No, so right now we have four.
Oh, you have four. Sorry,
four.
I apologize.
Yeah.
Four of you. Okay. So what does it look like from an initial engagement standpoint? So, you're out there. Are you doing the sales? Is Tura doing the sales? Is it combined? Like who is out there promoting you as a business?
So it's both of us. Sometimes,
Okay.
Sometimes it's one or the other of us, and sometimes it's both of us. It's really on a case-by-case basis, and kind of evaluate the prospect based on how our experience aligns with the project in a way. So, so we try and make sure that we're bringing the best experience possible to the table for whatever project that we're going after.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then in terms of like a division of labor, once let's say you've won the project, does it get assigned to one of you, or are you both involved along with the rest of the team in bringing that project forward through design development, etc.?
Yeah. So typically it's one of us that will lead the project,
Yeah.
and we'll have our team working on it, but we always still, the other partner who's not involved in the project is still hands-on to a degree,
Yeah.
still has their eyes on the project. So still making sure that a certain vision, certain ideas, certain thoughts are considered, and to make sure that there's just a second set of eyes looking at it, which is always leads to the success of a project or to anything really.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you bring the project forward. Is there a capacity at which you can run? So are you able to run, would you want to run 20, 30 projects, or are you focused more so on handling, let's say, like, 3 or 4 residential projects, maybe 1 or 2 institutional, or 5 and 5? Like, what does the business look like from a capacity standpoint?
Yeah. So I think at any one time, we probably, like right now, we have 2-3 projects between schematic design development, maybe 5 or 6 in CA. And yeah, so we're able to, and some that are kind of dormant. But yeah, those active projects, and we always try to balance, try not to take too much on, and try to also see what other resources are out there if we do have a lot of work on the boards. But I think at the scale that we're at, it's really important to be flexible in terms of capacity. So it's hard to kind of right size the amount of work in the office with the amount of staff at this scale. So we do have like some contract workers come on sometimes, and to allow us to grow slightly, but not to take on any significant staff costs.
Yeah. You don't assume necessarily that risk.
Yeah.
Every time you bring somebody else in, you're having to worry about getting food on the table for them and their family, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay. So you'll hand off some contract work, and so it sounds to me like, generally right now, capacity is somewhere in the ballpark of like somewhere between like 6 to 10 projects, right? Actively, whether it's in some form of design or potentially in construction, or am I wrong in saying that?
No. Yeah, that's
right.
Around it. Yeah. So yeah, it depends on the scale of projects as well. So we also try to make sure that we have capacity to take on new projects, especially new projects of certain scale. So we're also trying to mind that, because I think where we see the practice going is taking on both larger residential projects, but I think particularly larger institutional and cultural projects. And
describe larger to me.
For institutional,
Yeah.
in the $5 to $15 million construction cost range,
Yeah.
or even slightly larger. But I think right now and then for residential as well, looking at projects above like $1.5 million construction cost.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's expanding there, and also being able to complete those projects really as much as possible in-house. So it's a balance right now to try and have the internal capacity to take on the projects we have, but also to take on future projects,
right,
where we would have to scale up slightly.
It's a conversation I've had with a few people, and I continue to have like on a daily basis with a lot of the practices in the city. And that ongoing challenge of what is the right sauce to work with in this, because it's hard. It's you have to deal with sales, you have to deal with managing the projects that you're winning, or sometimes it's the back and forth in that RFP process, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're getting down to the nitty gritty of like you making it to like final 2, and there's an ongoing conversation that has to happen, or some revision to your application, right? But then you win it, and you have to then start managing it. And what does the workflow look like? And what does the projection of staffing look like? And all of this, it's like, it is not a straight path. And what I think a lot of people fail to understand about architecture. I've said this, I think, on another episode, but there's a lot of risk. Your license is tied to what you're designing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So outside of just like that, then you also bring on a staff, and now you're dealing with the risk of staff.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And can people fulfill what you've just gone out and told an entity that you can, whether it's institutional or that entity is a homeowner?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
People, I think, people just don't understand the risk associated with this, that stamp means a lot.
Yes. Yeah. For a lot of the other stakeholders on projects, the risk is often solely financial, which obviously is significant, but there are much longer term implications for architects, and that are harder to mitigate than some of the other stakeholders,
and potentially recover from, right?
Yeah.
So okay, so you're trying to get to a point where the business is taking on larger scale projects and opportunities. I'm curious to know, out of the projects that you've completed over the last 6 to 7 years on your own now, what have been some of the most rewarding projects, or if you have the most rewarding project that you can think of? What was it? Has any of that tied into what you had described before from Australia, from a cultural perspective?
Yeah. So I think one project that's in the process of wrapping up is the Wild Seed Center. So it's the Wild Seed Center for Art and Activism. It's a cultural space that is owned by Black Lives Matter Canada, and it's in the process of completing, or construction is about to be completed on the first phase of this project, which involves upgrades, like from a practical standpoint. It's like some energy efficiency upgrades, some accessibility upgrades, and new finishes, and opening up the space. But it's really about creating a space of community, a space of care, a space to support artists and activists to really thrive and to build community.
And what's the size? What type of space is it?
So it's a former site, has a very long history. So it was a semi-detached house on Cecil Street, just east of Spadina.
Okay.
In downtown Toronto.
Yeah.
And it was originally a building on that site was originally constructed in the 1890s.
Wow.
And most of the houses on that street are of that vintage. But this building was actually became the headquarters of the Communist Party of Canada in the 70s.
Really?
Yeah. And it was...
So it has a history of activism.
The street has a history of activism. The street, there was a lot of, throughout the 20th century, it started with a lot of Eastern European Jewish organizations in the 20s and 30s that came together in that neighborhood and really thrived and created really strong community organizations. Later, there were significant Chinese community organizations. Right next door, there was a organization that was founded by a man who was really instrumental in really pushing the federal government to support immigration of Black workers from the Caribbean in the 50s. Like Greenpeace is across the street. There are a bunch of unions around. Like, it's a real hub of activist activity.
Yeah.
And organizing. So it's a really interesting, really appropriate site for Wild Seed. And the building was actually rebuilt in the early 80s and has housed some other organizations, including a cancer treatment center in the early 2000s. And so it was purchased a few years ago with this dream of creating this real thriving space for art and activism in the heart of this neighborhood that's supported that for well over a century.
Yeah, literally a century worth of...
Yeah. So all these organizations have built upon one another to really support each other. So it's a really strong, like, there's a strong sense of community in that neighborhood.
And so what have you made uniquely about this space to complement what you've described as a communal space that, for arts and activism? Like what does some of the interior space look like?
Yeah.
Can you describe that?
Yeah. So I think when you approach the building, this part is still under construction at the moment as we speak.
Yeah.
But just creating a much more prominent access for wheelchair access or accessibility, using materials that are really of the earth. So a lot of wood, we're using rammed earth for a planter on the exterior. It's actually one of the first rammed earth installations in downtown Toronto.
Really?
Yeah. It's going to be really beautiful. Hopefully it'll be installed in the next couple of months.
I like how subtly you just like, I think it could be one of the first rammed earth. It's like, no big deal.
Yeah, it's this really, really great, great material. Connected to the land, and there's going to be a lot of work to the landscape as well. There's going to be in the future this bronze canopy that you walk through. The materiality of that is connected both to many ideas, many references, linking back to materiality of different communities in the African diaspora. As you come into the space, there's the vestibule, which really creates this sense of welcome and sense of enclosure. As you enter the building, this sound, the sight, the colors really create a transition from the exterior into this welcoming interior. And as you go into the building, we've created a large gallery space that also has that both references the previously existing building, but also we play with the forms and the colors and the materials to, I think, really make it into a welcoming space, a very calming space, but a space that really allows people to come together and really share ideas and share thoughts. It's the color and materials, the forms, but done in subtle ways, because we also realized early on that it's a space for artists, and artists will change, manipulate, do many things to the space.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important that we allow for that flexibility to occur and don't create a condition where it's too rigid in terms of what the space is. So I think it's really excited by that. And there may be even more opportunities in the future to explore that space and how it evolves over the years. Yeah.
Very interesting. I'm just seeing this as kind of creating like a canvas for the people that are about to go walk and experience this place, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be all different types of arts that are in there.
Yeah. So it's really just kind of a great open-ended space that really supports the many artists and community workers who've supported the organization over the years, and creates a platform for them to do even more. So it's exciting. It's really exciting. It's really exciting that we'll be able to continue learning from them as they actually use the space, inhabit the space, and share their thoughts, share their experiences as to what can be even built upon in the future.
Right. Okay. And in terms of other projects that you're currently looking at, are you in the process right now of any RFPs on any of these other cultural centers that you're trying to get involved with, or you're nodding yes.
Yes. There are a couple
without saying what or who or anything. There are,
and some exciting ones, and some really exciting ones. So we're I think at a point where we're also going after arts installations and public artwork. We're working on a project in Oakville right now that looks at the history of early 19th century Black settlers to the Oakville, Burlington area, and some of the innovations with metalwork and that some of the early Black settlers were responsible for. And there are just, so many opportunities, so many really, really fun projects and ideas that we've had the opportunity to even just discuss with clients. Sometimes they start and don't go as far as we sometimes would like, but even just having that discussion, the conversation around what is possible with a space or with a project is itself even really enlightening.
I have to say that the entire time that we have been talking right now, what no one else can see, and this is just for me, but I'm going to say it, right, is that you've had a smile on your face talking about all of this the entire time.
Yeah, no, it's, I'm passionate. I love the work that we do as a team, and
I can literally see it and I can feel it. I mean, it is palpable for me, because when you talk about the ability to be able to connect with your culture in such a strong and meaningful way across multiple areas of the GTA and influencing and trying to empower other people in feeling that same level of connectivity, I think that you are really being able to enrich the culture and the aware. And I think in many ways, now having heard this from you, the awareness, I never knew, living in this city my entire life, I never knew that the Communist Party would have had a home in a place across where current Greenpeace is. That was prior to that a part of Chinese culture, and prior to that I'm Jewish, a part of Jewish culture. Like I never knew this.
And I think that's the thing with architecture, is that it's obviously you're working on defining space, creating space, but it's located on a site, and sites have so many overlapping histories and narratives. And I think architecture becomes even more rich when it really tries to explore those narratives. And sometimes it's not always apparent how that exploration will feed into the architecture aesthetically, but it's still worth the journey to uncover those stories, to have that narrative, have that context. So this also kind of ties into the course I'm teaching design studio at McGill this semester, and last year as well, winter 2023. It's exploring the history of this cultural center that was at the heart of Montreal's Black community, that really thrived from the 20s until the 1920s until the late 80s. And the cultural center lost funding in the 80s. It was the organization was no longer to operate it, and it became derelict, and eventually a wall collapsed about 10 years ago, and the building was demolished. And now the city of Montreal is in the process of purchasing the site and reestablishing a new cultural center that builds upon the history of Black community in the neighborhood, and looks to really create a new home, a new venue for community activities, and also a home for community stories, narratives, and archival elements even. And so the design studio is really looking at how the students can explore these narratives, explore these histories of the site, and to reimagine a new future for the community through that exploration. So it's kind of all tied into, we're trying to explore is like, how does culture and community and history tie into architecture, and what are the what new realities can be explored or created or conceived of with that through that exploration.
It's interesting. So with all of that, I'm curious, and I just try to ask everyone this question. What you do can be very stressful, right?
Yes, incredibly.
You can carry that with you in many ways. So what do you find is some of the ways that you like to be able to let go of that stress? Do you travel, activities?
Yeah,
what do you do in your free time?
Yeah, traveling is one thing. When they have the rare opportunity to do so, but we were actually just last week in Barbados as part of it was both a March break, but also SOCA was the recipient of one of the two recipients of the Professional Prix de Rome last year.
Okay.
And it's a travel grant that supports exploration of different ideas. It's a self-directed travel grant. So our proposal was to explore cultural sites and social housing and climate resilient housing in Western Europe, Eastern US, and the Caribbean. And yeah, so it was both a travel, but also some research into a project that we're potentially working on in Barbados, and really looking at how to create climate resilient housing that's really rooted in traditional ways of building, and to create an affordable climate resilient space for family that's looking to explore a new home in Barbados. And so there's that. I sports occasionally, but your body doesn't always stand up to the wear and tear.
I have to add something. I have to add something. So I told you before we started this interview about how I grew up playing tennis. I told you about a match and all the rest of it. So my coach is Bayesian.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
And for years there was always a trip that would always go there, and I never got there. And I promised my wife years ago that I was going to take her to Barbados. Next to you, there's a photo of a plane going to Barbados that I promised I would take her on the trip. I still haven't gone. Barbados has evaded me for like 25 years, 30 years. Anyhow, sorry, I have to get there. The next trip that we go on, the next hot trip we go on has got to be to Barbados. Nonetheless, sorry, I take away from what you were saying. So your body's not holding up to sports.
Yeah. That had been something that was a good way of releasing the stress. But getting not as resilient as I used to be.
Yeah, well, that happens as you get into your 40s.
Yes.
I've heard from others that apparently it gets worse. Shane, I got to tell you, man, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on. I'm so thankful for you taking the time. I know that we had initially booked this and schedules conflicted for a little while, but I'm happy that we were able to finally get it down in the books and that you were able to join. It was completely enlightening. It's a pleasure to hear about someone that is that connected culturally to their history and to their lineage, and that they want to continue to pursue that for good in a city as eclectic as Toronto, and potentially beyond into Barbados and other areas of the world. So I'm really appreciative of you taking the time. I thank you greatly for it.
Thank you for inviting me, and had a great time. So hope to continue this conversation some other time.
Definitely. Thanks again.
All right, thank you.